So Baby Reindeer, it's a British black comedy created by and starring a guy named Richard God, a comedy writer, comedian. It is a fictionalization of his real life experiences. And here is what it's about. The plot is a struggling comedian like God, but he calls himself Donnie Dunn. He is groomed and sexually molested and raped by an older man in show business who makes promises to him. And that makes him sexually confused. He becomes sexually confused and desperate for approval and attention. He invites this crazed female stalker into his life. He goes around sleeping with everybody, trying to prove to himself whether he's gay or bi or what is he. He doesn't know because he's been so devastated by being raped. And this stalker comes into his life, a wonderful performance by a lady named Jessica Gunning. She's very fat, she's overweight, and she just goes from being almost charming to furious and dangerous in a scene. And she ruins his life, but he can't let go of her. He's part of her stalking. She ruins his life while he's trying to develop a relationship with a trans woman who attracts him. That's the story, all right? So I know what conservatives are saying. Yeah, we don't want to say that. All right, here's a little bit of the trailer, cut 8.
I really don't know where it's going to end. I think one of us is going to have to die now.
You say this woman's stalking you?
Yeah, like 6 months maybe.
Why'd it take you so long to report it?
I think she needs help. She comes to my work, my house. She sends me emails, like, all the time.
Are any threatening towards you?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's particularly threatening.
There's a reason you're keeping her around, and maybe it's what she gives you.
You've got really manly hands, haven't you? Chiseled jawline. Should we run away together? So you're a comedian?
Sort of.
It's not going well.
So is that a question?
Somebody hurt you, didn't they? Who was it?
Martha, can you let go of my hand now, please?
All right, so it goes on and on. The usual conservative thing here is to disapprove on moral grounds. There's gay people. There's trans people. There are people sleeping in sex, blah, 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 blah. Okay, the usual left-wing thing is to pretend nothing's going on. Nothing. The problem is he's being stalked. If he could just stop being stalked, if he could just get over it and he could have a wonderful relationship with this trans person, then everything would be, they want to pretend that this is the normal. We, the conservatives, are weird for thinking anything's wrong. I want to do something different. A while back, I showed you 2 pictures. One was Michelangelo's creation of Adam from the Sistine Chapel, and the other was some squiggly mess by Jackson Pollock. And my point in showing you these 2 things, was not that one is good and one is bad, although I hate Jackson Pollock, he means nothing to me, but that both are art because they represent the soul of the culture in that moment. If Pollock had painted the scene on the Sistine Chapel, no one would have liked it because it would not have represented where the world was. Some people would have liked it, but the people who control the arts, which is the clerisy, the elites, they would have said, we don't understand what this is. Why, this is old-fashioned. It's out of date. It would be just as if someone made a Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers movie today. It would look weirdly out of date. What does this say to us? This is not what's happening in our country right now, and they would be right. So this Netflix show is a work by a talented young guy, and it speaks to something in the culture because Netflix didn't promote it very much, and yet it led to a rush of subscriptions. And I've watched it clean through. I've watched the whole thing. And I don't think it's great work. I thought it was compelling. I kept coming back. I wanted to see what happened, and I got interested and involved in the characters. And I thought it had some honesty to it. It had a sense of despair, and the creator himself didn't seem to fully understand where the despair came from, but he did say that he himself, it was a real thing that really happened to him, and he said he was part of this. Let's play a little bit of an interview he did on TV.
I didn't want to do a sort of, it felt too easy to do a cup of tea and, aren't I such a victim? It didn't feel that way. Exactly. It didn't feel that way in life. I indulged it. I was in a bad place. I made stupid errors. I sort of felt like I needed someone to give me attention in a way because my confidence was rock bottom. And I wanted to get that in. I wanted to show the nuances of the human condition, really. I wanted to show that people are a mixture of good and bad. And I think stalker stories usually tend to be one person's good, one person's bad, and I wanted to kind of get away from that.
He shows you that this guy, Donnie Dunn, who is the fictionalized version of him, keeps inviting this woman back into his life. And she's a psychopath. He keeps inviting her back into his life because he needs the approval. He needs her to approve of him. So the three main characters are Donnie Dunn and Martha the stalker and Terry the trans therapist. And each one of them wants to establish his identity through desire, wants to find out who he wants to sleep with so he will know who he is. Dunn wants to know, is he gay? Is he bi? What is he like? The trans girl sort of solves that problem for him because it's really a man, but also, a woman, a very convincing woman. The trans woman doesn't want to be a woman, but she's depicted, I'll call her she's depicted as confident and content. But the minute anybody challenges her identity as a woman, when the stalker comes in and says, you look like a man, or when Donnie Dunn can't get aroused by her, she falls apart. She starts to realize she is a man and she hates it, and then her hair starts to fall out and she spirals into depression. And Martha is constantly lying and wants to believe that she's a big professional, a lawyer, and that's sexually attractive. And whenever anybody challenges her identity, she flies into a rage. So everyone is trying to overcome a sense of shame, a sense of phoniness, and they want to establish their personality by defining their desire, their sexual desire, right? And the whole thing is, each one of them thinks that the shame is an imposition of the culture, that they want to break free of this false culture that is making them feel ashamed. And Dunn keeps saying, if only I could get over my shame and sleep and have sex with this trans woman, then I would be happy and I'd be in love. And when he actually does this, he's not happy. He's obviously, he's not happy at all. And in fact, the show is honest enough, and the reason I kind of respected it was it's honest enough to show him trapped, like he never really gets out of the bind that he's in. In fact, he sort of becomes a version of the stalker in the end. Now, all of this comes from, and this is what the New York Times sells every day, right? It's you shouldn't be ashamed. Shame is the problem. If only you can get rid of shame, then you can do the thing that you want to do, sleep with the person you want to sleep with, have a throuple, have a quadruple, whatever you want to have. As long as you don't have sex and marriage, the New York Times doesn't care what you do. This is a misreading of Sigmund Freud. It's a natural misreading of Sigmund Freud, who was a materialist, who was an atheist, and he said that all higher human motivation is essentially sexual energy repressed. So you repress sexual energy for social reasons, and then that means you turn to art instead. You build bridges instead. It's not true, but that was basically, instead of saying that you have a spirit, you just have this sexual energy coming out and you redirect it to other things. And ultimately, although Freud didn't say this at all, people started to think, well, if I could just get rid of the shame of the repression, then my sexual desires would run free and I would at last be happy. And we look around at the world, and of course people are sexually free, but they're not happy at all. The philosopher who really would have loved Baby Reindeer is Søren Kierkegaard. He was a Danish philosopher of the 19th century, died unloved, unwept. Nobody knew who he was. People thought he was ridiculous. People still have trouble reading him today because he was a Christian, but he also understood Christianity from a deeply realistic and tragic perspective. And he wrote a book called The Sickness Unto Death. And the sickness unto death, it comes from the story of Lazarus, where Jesus says of Lazarus, he says, this is not a sickness unto death. And Kierkegaard is a tremendously difficult philosopher, and I have like 5 minutes to talk about him, so I'm going to really be cutting corners and simplifying everything he said. But the sickness unto death is unbelief. It's atheism, essentially. It's the detachment from God, and it leads to despair. And there are three kinds of despair in the sickness unto death. One is not knowing that you are a spirit, that not knowing you have a self at all, a spiritual self. You're just a body. That's one kind of despair. And the other kind of despair, and the second kind of despair, is feeling that yourself is out of line with the constructs of your society. And that is what the people in Baby Reindeer think that they're suffering from. They think they're suffering from society. If only I could get rid of the shame, if only I could get rid of the shame and commit these acts, these sexual acts that I want to commit, then I will be myself. I will be who I am. But the third and worst form of despair in the sickness unto death is not understanding that yourself does not arise from yourself. It arises from the God of love. It arises from love, which is the creator of the world, which is the God, the Christian God. And if you do not understand that when you lose yourself, you find yourself, because you lose yourself in that love establishes who you are. If you don't understand that, you suffering or you refuse to establish yourself in God, then you are in the deepest despair of all. That is the deepest despair of all. And Kierkegaard says the worst despair in a way is despair that doesn't know it's despair, because it's a double negative, right? Not only is the despair bad, but the fact that you don't even know you're in despair. And that's what's happened to the characters in Baby Reindeer. And I think probably to the artist. The reason it's not a great work of art is because I don't think the guy has ever read Kierkegaard. I think if he had known what he was writing about, if he understood what he was writing about, then he would have understood his characters more deeply, I believe. It doesn't mean he would have written anything different. It's just that the way that the characters presented themselves would have been different. He doesn't know whether he's gay, for instance, because he was raped. If he's just working out the insecurity that arose from being raped, was this something that was buried inside me and this guy did it to me, or was it something that's imposed on? He doesn't know, but he thinks that that's where his identity lies. And the show ends in a state of complete despair and entrapment. So here is what I want you to think about, okay? Conservatives, the first thing they do is they say, oh, this is disgusting because of all the things that are in this. Or it should have ended like this, so we got a good message, we got a positive message. But what I'm saying is, just like Jackson Pollock, you may not like Jackson Pollock. I don't like Jackson Pollock, but I don't like Jackson Pollock because he accurately represents an empty culture, a dead culture, a culture that has reached the end of its creative period and is just splashing paint on a canvas. I think that's true of Baby Reindeer too. I think he accurately represents a culture that thinks it desperately thinks it can find its identity in sexual desire, that its body will provide the identity that it needs, that you're only a body, and therefore your body's desires are your desires, instead of realizing that you are a spirit and the love that created you is going to supply you with the will and the desires that you need. And then I don't know what your sex life is going to look like. I'm not in charge of your sex life, okay? So my question to you as conservatives, as people who are on the brink of winning the culture but can't pull the trigger, do not know how to pull the trigger, is do you see how condemning people does not advance you in your search for yourself, your spirit, one little bit? Not one little bit. When Jesus said, judge not, the reason I keep saying Jesus meant what he said when he said, judge not, is because it doesn't advance you toward the releasing of yourself into the creation of yourself, into finding yourself. What Baby Reindeer shows you is the despair that you will come to if you try and establish yourself purely through money. So that's capitalism for you. Purely through fame. So that's ambition and our celebrity culture that you're in. Purely through sexuality, even if it's sexuality that is licit, even if it's you get married and you're faithful, that sexuality, even that is not going to reveal yourself to you because it's not who you are. It's not the basis of who you are. It's just a desire of your body. You all know, love sex, big fan, but it's just a desire of your body. It is not who you are. When you look at Baby Reindeer as a work of art, a good work of art, not a great one, but a good one, the question it is asking you is, where are you looking for yourself? It may not be what Richard God meant to say, but it is the question that it asks whether he likes it or not. Where are you looking for yourself? That was great. If you want more, like and subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.